I was preparing to celebrate his triumph, but I found him in the arms of someone else. That second ruined my life, but it opened my eyes to a much darker truth. Do you think this is a story about a banal betrayal? This is just the beginning. I turned by to congratulate my husband on his recent promotion, and I accidentally caught him kissing his assistant, whose slender, chiseled legs always caused me a dull irritation. I left without the slightest scene, maintaining absolute composure, although everything inside me was bubbling and crumbling to dust. I just initiated the transfer of all funds from his financial accounts and replaced the locking mechanisms in our apartment. However, the most intriguing part of the story unfolded, which none of the participants in this love trio even knew about. Sarah pulled into the corporate center parking lot, expertly maneuvering between luxury imported cars. The California sun glinted on a glossy package with a festive confection resting on the passenger seat, next to a bouquet of lavender anemones, Daniel's favorite flowers. She caught her reflection in the side mirror and straightened a stray strand, mentally reciting the prepared text. "Congratulations, Executive Director of Business Development," she whispered, practicing a joyful smile. The security guard at the lobby nodded amiably, recognizing her, and did not even dial the internal number, just waved his hand in the direction of the control barrier. "Come on in, Miss Everton. Mr. Wallace is in his office." He winked at her, like an accomplice in arranging a surprise. The supervisor's spouse is always a welcome guest. The executive director. This title sounded so well-deserved. They've been striving for this for 8 years. Countless hours of overwork, long-distance trips, evenings spent cuddling with a work laptop. Sarah was an all-round support for her husband, denying herself a vacation, postponing plans for the birth of heirs. All in good time, Daniel kept saying. First a career, then a family. In the elevator, she refreshed her lipstick and straightened the hem of a light ivory dress, a new one, purchased especially for this significant day. The door swung open on the 17th level, and Sarah confidently walked down the familiar aisle to her husband's reception area. The workplace of Holly, Daniel's personal assistant, was unoccupied. The computer was on, and there was a screensaver with a picture of a tropical atoll on the display, an unfinished portion of latte in a branded mug. The door to her husband's office was ajar. This is unusual, given his punctuality in maintaining confidentiality during the work process. Sarah wanted to knock, but something made her freeze. A strange noise came from inside. Not an office conversation, not an incoming call, but something completely different. She peered cautiously through the narrow gap between the door leaf and the box. The first thing she saw was her husband's back. Daniel stood with Holly pinned against the wall. His palms slid under her thin blouse, and their mouths merged in a long, insatiable kiss. Holly moaned softly, throwing her head back. Her delicate, immaculately manicured fingers tangled in Daniel's hair. "Finally, we cannot hide," Holly whispered when their lips parted for a brief moment. "Now that you're officially in office?" Daniel didn't let her finish, biting into her lips again. Sarah abruptly backed away from the entrance. The bouquet slipped from her numb fingers, but she managed to grab it from the floor. The dessert was still clutched tightly in his other hand, a ridiculous witness to the collapse of her universe. She backed away soundlessly, feeling the numbness cover not only her limbs, but her entire body. Her legs moved on pure instinct, taking her away from the waiting room, from this disgusting sight, from the betrayal that her psyche refused to accept. In the women's room of the corporate building, she had a vomiting attack. Stomach contents, morning latte, and toast with feta cheese came out in excruciating spasms. With shaking hands, she dabbed her mouth with a napkin and looked up at her reflection. A pale woman with dilated pupils was looking at her in the mirror. Her lips, which had been carefully painted that morning, were now bitten until they bled. Sarah opened the faucet and splashed cold water on her face, washing off the remnants of mascara. "Traitor," she whispered, looking in the mirror but no longer addressing herself. "What do you like, Holly?" Suddenly, she had an epiphany. Holly knew about her visit. She knew and deliberately left the doorway not fully closed. It was not an incident. It was a staged performance, a demonstration of superiority, a triumph of arrival. Sarah took a deep breath. Something cold and unshakable began to form inside, displacing the shock and pain. She took out her mobile phone and opened the banking application. $45,000 in their shared account and about $12,000 more in Daniel's personal account, to which she had a secret code. She made a decision. At home, Sarah methodically transferred funds from all joint accounts to her personal account at Stellar Credit Union, opened before their engagement. She documented each transaction with a screenshot, keeping a digital footprint of $57,300, their entire family's financial insurance, accumulated over the years of marriage. Her hands were no longer shaking. Every action was considered, every decision was cold and calculated. She changed the combination of access to the family vault, making it impossible for Daniel to enter. Inside were the deeds of title to the townhouse, issued to her as a marriage present from her parents, jewelry, and a small amount of cash. The next step was to call a qualified lockmaker. Fox locksmiths promised to arrive within an hour. While Sarah waited, she began collecting Daniel's clothes and personal belongings into cardboard boxes. Shirts, business suits, expensive watches, cufflinks. Everything was neatly stacked in containers, as if she was preparing a package and not eliminating the traces of her husband's presence in her life. In the drawer of the bedside table, she found a spare mobile phone, an old model that Daniel allegedly gave to his younger relative. She knew the password, the date of their first meeting. What an irony. Inside, there was correspondence between her husband and Holly, which had been going on for 9 months. She doesn't suspect anything. We'll be together soon. You're driving me crazy. Phrases from the messages burned my eyes. Sarah scrolled through the archive further, plunging into a parallel reality where her husband led a double life. But the real shock was waiting for her in the gallery of the device. Pictures of Daniel with a third lady, a buxom blonde who looked nothing like Sarah or Holly. Judging by the geolocation tags, the photos were taken in Miami 6 weeks ago during a business trip from which Daniel returned tanned and rested. Sarah took a deep breath and, without giving herself time to doubt, forwarded these images to her phone, then created a new email account and sent the pictures to Holly's corporate email with a laconic message. He betrays not only his wife. The doorbell announced the arrival of a specialist. An elderly man with a tired expression listened indifferently to the request to replace the locking devices. "My husband lost the keys," Sarah lied, presenting her driver's license with the address. "Here are the ownership documents. It's completely registered to me." The master nodded, showing no interest in the family drama. He had seen enough of these stories to know that lost keys had nothing to do with it. While he was working, Sarah continued to pack Daniel's possessions. In the inside pocket of one of the jackets, she found a receipt from a luxury boutique. Aquamarine earrings, bought 5 days ago. Daniel had never given her aquamarine jewelry for any holiday or anniversary, but Holly often wore blue gems that matched her eyes perfectly. New locking mechanisms were installed in 35 minutes. Sarah paid the master and received 4 sets of keys. She kept one for herself, put the other in a safe, and sent the third by courier to her mother in Seattle, just in case. She carefully arranged the containers with Daniel's belongings in the hallway, next to the elevator cabin. 9 cardboard boxes, all that was left of 8 years of marriage. Sarah put a short note on top. "The concierge has the keys. Don't try to call. We're getting divorced." Returning to the living room, she sank onto the plush sofa and allowed herself to cry for the first time that day. The tears flowed silently, bringing no relief. There was only one picture in front of my eyes. Daniel pinning Holly to the wall, their intertwined silhouettes, their shared secrets. The mobile phone vibrated. I received a notification from Western Bank about the temporary blocking of Daniel's card due to suspicious financial activity. They reacted faster than she expected. This foreshadowed that she had very little time left before he returned to the residence. Sarah wiped her tears and opened her laptop. She needed to have time to perform one more manipulation. She gained access to her husband's cloud storage. The access code remained the same, the date of their wedding, and began browsing through the file catalogs. In a folder with the discreet name Operation Gamma, she found what she was looking for. dozens of pictures of Daniel with various women. Holly was just one of many. Sarah methodically uploaded and classified the images, forming an archive of his infidelity. Each photo was marked with a date. Each one was accompanied by a brief explanation of the location and circumstances. Daniel kept a kind of register of his victories, unaware that he was creating a weapon against his own person. After completing her work with the archive, Sarah sent a selection of images to her mother-in-law's email account. Carol Blackwood adored her son and never hid that she considered Sarah to be an insufficiently worthy match for him. Now let her see what kind of angel she has raised. The communicator vibrated again. This time it was Daniel. Sarah dropped the call and deactivated the sound. She had nothing to tell him. At least not now, when the pain and rage are still too strong. She went to the window opening. It was getting dark. Daniel will return soon and discover that he no longer has a home. What happens next? Sarah didn't know, but she was sure of one thing. She would no longer allow herself to be a victim. There was a knock on the doorway. Sarah tensed, but then remembered that Daniel couldn't get inside without her permission now. She went to the door and looked through the optical peephole. A courier stood at the entrance with a flower arrangement. "Delivery for Miss Everton," the young man said as she opened the door. The bouquet was gigantic, with at least 60 red roses. There was a card attached to it. "I'm sorry for everything. We need to talk. Daniel." Sarah accepted the flowers, slammed the door, and, without hesitation, threw the bouquet into the garbage chute. She tore the message into tiny fragments. Her mobile device continued to vibrate with incoming messages and calls. Daniel, his mother-in-law, and even a few coworkers all wanted to know what was going on. Sarah turned off her phone and poured herself a drink. Daniel raised his glass of champagne, smiling at his colleagues gathered in the trendy lounge bar near the office. His eyes were shining with pride and anticipation. His appointment as executive director of business development was the culmination of his 5-year career at the company. 5 years of strategic decisions, extracurricular work, and carefully cultivated connections. "Beyond new horizons," he proclaimed, looking around the audience. 12 people, including Holly, who was sitting a little apart from the others, raised their glasses. Her dark emerald dress accentuated her slender figure, and the aquamarine earrings she'd bought 5 days ago twinkled in the dim lighting of the establishment. "And to our new leader, who will finally be able to realize all his ambitious concepts," added Victor, Daniel's deputy and his longtime friend. Holly smiled, but her gaze remained intense. She had already checked her communicator twice in the last 7 minutes, as if she was expecting a critical notification. Daniel winked at her across the table, hoping no one would notice the small gesture. "It's a pity that Sarah couldn't join us," Irina from the finance department remarked. "The only one who knew Daniel's wife. She would be proud of you." Daniel took a sip of the fizzy drink, masking his sudden unease. Sarah. He hadn't called her all day, too absorbed in accepting congratulations and planning for the future. A future in which there was no place for her. "She's not well," he lied, undeterred, "but we'll celebrate this event at home over the weekend." Holly's phone suddenly vibrated. She glanced at the display, and her face instantly transformed. The smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of shock and disbelief. His fingers frantically slid across the screen, opening certain files. Daniel watched her out of the corner of his eye, continuing to have a conversation with his colleagues. Something was obviously wrong. Holly turned pale, and her hands began to shake. She stood up abruptly, muttered an apology, and headed out of the bar. "I'm sorry." Daniel put down his glass and followed her, trying not to attract too much attention. It was drizzling outside. Holly stood under the awning of the entrance, clutching her phone to her chest. Her eyes were filled with tears. The mascara began to spread. "You lied to me," she whispered as Daniel approached. "All this time, you lied." She turned the phone to face him. In the photo, Daniel was hugging a blonde woman on a sandy beach in Miami, the one he spent 3 days with during a business trip 6 weeks ago. "A fleeting romance. It's nothing serious." He didn't even remember her name. Where did you get this? Daniel tried to take the device away, but Holly backed away. What's the difference? Her voice trembled with anger and pain. You cheated not only on your wife, but also on me. All this time, he's been saying that I'm special, that we'll be together as soon as you get a promotion. Daniel looked around. Several passers-by had already slowed down, attracted by the loud showdown. He tried to take Holly's hand, but she pulled it away as if from a hot object. Let's talk in the car, he suggested, lowering his voice. I'll explain everything. Explain what? How did you have fun with that blonde while you were swearing your feelings to me? Holly could no longer hold back her sobs. Or how did you plan to leave Sarah for me? Actually, I'm just one of many. She turned abruptly and strode away, leaving Daniel to face the increasing rain, which was turning into a downpour by the minute. He wanted to catch up with her, but the mobile phone in his jacket pocket vibrated. The bank called. Mr. Wallace, the operator's voice sounded alarmed. We have detected suspicious activity on your accounts. During the last hour, large transactions were made to a third-party account. Do you confirm these operations? Daniel froze, trying to comprehend what he had heard. What kind of transactions? What is the third-party account? No, I didn't translate anything. What amount are we talking about? The total amount of transfers is $57,300. We have temporarily blocked your debit cards. Daniel didn't finish listening. $57,000. All of his and Sarah's savings. What the hell is going on? He tried to dial his wife, but the phone was out of range. The rain intensified, turning into a real storm. Daniel ran to his car, texting Holly as he went. It was necessary to resolve one problem before dealing with another. I'm sorry, let's meet and talk. It's not what you think. Daniel started the engine and headed home, exceeding the speed limit and violating traffic rules. Anxiety was growing inside, not just because of finances, but because of a strange chain of coincidences. Holly's photos, her missing savings, Sarah's unavailable phone. As he approached the residence, he saw the flashing lights of an ambulance. The car was parked right at the entrance to his apartment complex. My heart skipped a beat. Is there something wrong with Sarah? He parked somehow and rushed to the entrance. The neighbors were crowding at the entrance. Daniel pushed past them and saw paramedics carrying a woman out on a gurney. With horror, he recognized Holly, pale, unconscious, with an oxygen mask on her face. What happened? He grabbed one of the medics by the sleeve. Are you a relative? He asked without stopping. Yes, I am her. Daniel stammered, not knowing what to say. Pregnant patient, heavy bleeding. Miscarriage is likely, the doctor threw over his shoulder. We're going to District Hospital number 12. Pregnant? Holly was pregnant with his child. Daniel froze, trying to process this news. They were always careful and used contraceptives. When could this have happened? He wanted to follow the ambulance, but remembered about Sarah and the missing funds. I had to figure it out at home first. Daniel went up to his floor and froze when he saw the bulky boxes neatly stacked by the apartment door. His stuff. All of his personal belongings were packed and put out in the hallway like trash. There was a note on the top box. The concierge has the keys. Don't call me. We're getting divorced. Daniel rushed to the door and inserted the key in the lock. The key didn't fit. He tried again, and then again. Unsuccessfully. The lock has been replaced. Sarah. He pounded on the door leaf. Open up. We need to talk. Silence. He pressed his ear to the door, trying to catch at least some sound from inside. Nothing. I wouldn't make any noise if I were you, a voice said from behind him. Daniel turned around. The concierge of the complex, an elderly man with a gray mustache, looked at him without the slightest sympathy. Your wife asked me to tell you that if you make noise, She will call the police, and I will support her," he added, crossing his arms over his chest. "It's not the first time I've seen gentlemen gathering their belongings in the stairwell." "Listen, this is my apartment." Daniel felt himself boiling with impotence and rage. "As far as I'm aware, the property is registered to Miss Everton." The concierge shrugged his shoulders. "So I advise you to take your things and leave in a good way. By the way, I also have the keys to your SUV. She said you can pick up the car." Daniel clenched his fists. The situation was getting out of control. Sarah somehow found out about Holly, took all the funds, changed the locking devices, and now Holly's in the hospital. Maybe she's losing their baby. The phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "Daniel, what's going on?" Carol Blackwood's voice was trembling with anger. "I just got the photos. Are you with some women? It's disgusting. How could you do this to Sarah?" "Mom, I can't talk right now." Daniel rubbed his temples, feeling a migraine coming. "I have an emergency here." "An emergency?" The mother raised her tone. "You've disgraced the whole family. Sarah is such a wonderful lady, and I always knew that you took after your father, but to be so." Daniel dropped the call. It was too much. He sat down on one of the boxes with his belongings and put his head in his hands. How could everything have collapsed so quickly? He was at the peak of his success this morning. New position, prospects, future plans with Holly. The phone vibrated again. This time it's a text message from an unknown contact. "Mr. Wallace is Holly's husband. If you don't come to the hospital right now, I will file a police report. She lost the baby." Husband. Holly had a husband. Daniel felt the ground give way beneath his feet. She never mentioned her spouse. She always said that she was free, that she was waiting only for his decision to start a life together. He jumped up, grabbed the keys to the SUV from the concierge, and rushed to the exit. The belongings could wait. What was needed now was to deal with Holly and this mysterious husband. The hospital was in the usual chaos of the emergency room. Daniel called Holly's name, and the nurse pointed to a hallway on the left. "The intensive care unit is at the end of the hall, but only the next of kin are allowed in there." Daniel nodded and headed in the direction indicated. A man in his 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, with an athletic build, was sitting at the entrance to the department. When he saw Daniel, he slowly got up. "You, Daniel?" he asked softly, but there was such a threat in that silence that Daniel involuntarily took a step back. "Yeah, and you?" "Stephen, Holly's husband?" The man looked at him with undisguised hostility. 5 years of marriage. You know, she and I were planning children. It didn't work out for a long time, and then you appeared in her life." Daniel was silent, not knowing what to say. Everything he believed in turned out to be fiction. Holly wasn't a free woman waiting only for him. She was someone's wife, just like Sarah was his wife. "How is she?" he finally asked. "How is she?" Stephen smiled bitterly. "I lost my baby. Doctors assume it's because of extreme stress. I got some photos this morning." Sarah woke up to the persistent ringing of the phone. Sunlight was already flooding the bedroom with bright rays, making its way through the loosely drawn curtains. She reached over to the bedside table, glanced at the display, and frowned. The unfamiliar number is the 4th one in the last 40 minutes. "Hello," she said sleepily, bringing the phone to her ear. "Miss Everton, Metropolitan News Agency. We would like to hear from you about the situation with your husband and his girlfriend. Is it true that you—" Sarah dropped the call and sat up in bed, fully awake. What's happening? How did the journalists find out her number? And most importantly, what do they know? She opened the browser on her phone and entered Daniel Wallace's name into the search bar. The results made her freeze. Dozens of news reports published in the last 14 hours. The director of a large company was detained after a fight in a hospital facility. The love triangle ended in tragedy. The spouse took revenge on the infidel by depriving him of everything. Sarah flipped through several articles, feeling cold inside. Details of their intimate life, images of Daniel with his girlfriends, and screenshots of bank transfers. It was all on display. Someone leaked information to the press, and they did it professionally and mercilessly. The phone rang again. This time it was her boss from the architectural bureau where Sarah worked as a lead designer. "Have you seen the news?" asked Helen Harris without preamble. "The whole office is just talking about it." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to collect her thoughts. So now my colleagues know too. Great. Just wonderful. Yes, I'm fine, she lied, getting out of bed and heading for the kitchen stove. I just didn't expect such a response. "You're the heroine of the day, dear." There was undisguised admiration in the boss's voice. Most women would just cry into their pillows. And you, oh my God, how are you? I've always said that you're not shy. Sarah grimaced as she filled the kettle with water. She didn't feel like a heroine, but rather a victim of circumstances, acting on autopilot under the influence of shock and rage. "Listen, can I take the day off today?" she asked, realizing that she was not ready to meet with colleagues and answer their questions. "Sure, take at least a couple of days," Helen Harris generously allowed. "Just keep me posted, okay? And if you need any help, legal or otherwise, contact us. The whole corporation is on your side." Sarah completed the dialogue and checked her social media accounts and was horrified. Her pages were filled with messages from friends, acquaintances, and complete strangers. Some expressed support, others expressed condemnation, and others requested interviews or offered to participate in a talk show. She closed the app and dialed her mother's number. It was necessary to warn the parents before they found out about everything from the media reports. "Sorochka, I was just going to call you." Her mother sounded worried. "I just got a call from Susan from the condo next door. He says you're in some kind of news. What happened?" Sarah outlined the situation briefly, omitting the most unpleasant details. The mother gasped and groaned, shifting from sympathy to outrage and back again. "I always felt that something was wrong with him," she said at the end of the conversation. "Too perfect, too correct. You can't trust them. But you're doing great, daughter. I did the right thing by not putting up with it." After the call, Sarah took a shower and brewed a strong espresso. My thoughts gradually cleared up. It was necessary to act rationally and not give in to emotions. First of all, find a high-class lawyer. If Daniel gets out of the police station, he'll probably try to get the money back through the court. She opened her laptop and started searching for information about the divorce proceedings and asset allocation. An hour later, when she was already immersed in studying the legal intricacies, the doorbell rang. Sarah tensed. Had Daniel gotten free and come to sort things out? She went to the front door and looked through the peephole. A courier stood on the landing with a bulky cardboard package in his hands. "Delivery for Miss Everton," the young man said as she opened the door. "Please sign it." Inside the box was a luxurious bouquet of white lilies and a bottle of premium champagne. A card was attached to the flowers. "I admire your determination. Yours sincerely, Stephen." Stephen. Sarah frowned, trying to remember if she knew anyone with that name. And then it hit her, Holly's husband, the one Daniel hadn't even known existed. But how did he know her address, and why did he send the flowers? The communicator rang again. This time, it's her legal advisor, whom she consulted 2 years ago about the settlement of the inheritance after her father's death. "Miss Everton, I've seen the news," Mr. Rogers began without preamble. "If you need legal assistance in this situation, I am ready to represent your interests." "Thank you, Mr. Rogers." Sarah felt relieved. "I was just about to call you. The situation looks pretty confusing." "It's not more complicated than it looks," the lawyer confidently interrupted. "You have a prenuptial agreement, right? The one we made up before the wedding?" Sarah froze. The prenuptial agreement. She had completely forgotten about it, a document signed 8 years ago at her parents' insistence. Daniel chuckled at the time, calling it reinsurance, but agreed so as not to spoil relations with his future father-in-law. Yes, there is a contract, but I don't remember the exact wording, she admitted. But I remember, the lawyer's voice sounded satisfied. It clearly states that in the case of proven adultery, all jointly acquired assets remain with the injured party. And judging by the media reports, you have all the evidence of your husband's infidelity. Sarah sank into a chair, feeling a strange sense of peace spread through her body. She acted on instinct, obeying anger and pain, but it turns out that the law was on her side from the very beginning. What should I do next? She asked. Wait. Your husband will probably file a lawsuit as soon as he gets out of custody. We'll be ready. In the meantime, collect all evidence of treason, photographs, email correspondence, witness statements, if any. After talking to her lawyer, Sarah decided to leave the apartment after all. It was necessary to purchase provisions and clear his mind. She put on sunglasses and a baseball cap, hoping to remain unidentified. In the supermarket next to her house, her plan failed. The cashier, a young girl with bright purple hair, recognized her instantly. "It's you," she exclaimed, smiling broadly. "The lady from the news. Can I take a picture with you?" Sarah was confused, not knowing how to react. Curious shoppers had already begun to gather around, whispering and pointing at her. "I'm sorry, but I'm in a hurry," she muttered, paying for her purchases and hurriedly leaving the store. There was a new surprise waiting for her at home, an official summons from law enforcement agencies. She was called for questioning as a witness in a personal injury case. The application was filed by Holly's mother, accusing Sarah of intentionally causing moral and physical damage, which had serious consequences. Sarah reread the document several times in disbelief. She was accused of intentionally sending photos of Holly, knowing about her pregnancy, in order to cause stress and harm. It's absurd. She didn't even know Holly was pregnant. She immediately contacted her lawyer, who advised her to remain calm and prepare to testify. "They won't be able to prove anything," he assured. "You didn't know about the pregnancy. You couldn't have foreseen such consequences. The maximum they will be able to do is to accuse them of spreading personal information without consent. But given the circumstances, the court will be on your side." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the police station. In the hallway, she bumped into an elderly woman whose face seemed vaguely familiar to her. The woman gave her a hateful look. "Are you satisfied?" she asked through clenched teeth. "My daughter is in the intensive care unit. She has lost a child and may never be able to have children. And all because of you." Sarah stopped, shocked by this information. Holly's mother, for that was exactly who she was, looked exhausted and aged with grief. "I didn't know she was pregnant," Sarah replied softly. "I didn't wish this on her. I just wanted her to know the truth about my husband." "Your husband?" The woman smiled bitterly. "The one you put out on the street and stripped of everything? And my Holly loved him. They were going to be together." "But what about her own husband?" asked Sarah. "She betrayed him too, cheating with Daniel." The woman's face was contorted with rage. "What husband? What are you talking about? Holly has never been married." Sarah froze, trying to process what she'd just heard. If Holly didn't have a spouse, then who was Stephen who sent her flowers? And who is the man Daniel got into a fight with at the hospital? The interrogation lasted 2 hours. The investigator, a tired, middle-aged man, asked the same questions, trying to catch Sarah in contradictions, but she held firm, repeating her version. She found the photos and sent them to Holly, unaware of her situation and not wanting to cause physical harm. "Do you understand that your actions could and did have serious consequences?" the investigator asked at the end of the conversation. "I understand that my actions were an emotional reaction to betrayal," Sarah replied. "But I could not foresee such consequences and did not want them. I just wanted the truth to come out." After the interrogation, Sarah left the police building feeling completely exhausted. There was a surprise waiting for her on the street. He was standing at the entrance. The courtroom was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Reporters in the back rows whispered to each other and surreptitiously took pictures on their phones despite the official ban. The story of Sarah and Daniel has long gone beyond the standard divorce process, turning into a scandalous saga that the whole city was following. Sarah sat straight with her hands folded in her lap, trying not to make eye contact with Holly, who was sitting on the other side of the room. Pale, emaciated, with faded eyes, her husband's ex-girlfriend looked completely different from the day Sarah saw her in Daniel's arms. "The trial begins. I ask everyone to stand up," the secretary announced. And the judge entered the courtroom, a middle-aged woman with a tired but attentive look. Holly's lawsuit against Sarah for compensation of moral and physical harm has begun. Holly's lawyer, a plump man with thinning hair combed back, began his speech with a dramatic description of his client's suffering. "As a result of the defendant's deliberate actions, my client lost not only her unborn child, but also the opportunity to ever become a mother. Medical reports confirm that the intense emotional shock caused by receiving an anonymous email with photographs provoked premature birth, complications, and, as a result, emergency surgery." Sarah listened, feeling nausea rise in her throat. She didn't want this. She didn't want to cause such damage. She just wanted Holly to find out the truth about Daniel, to experience the same pain of betrayal as she did. Sarah's lawyer, Mr. Rogers, kept a straight face. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up and calmly addressed the court. "Dear court, my client did send the photos to Miss Sokolova. However, she did not know about her pregnancy and could not have foreseen such severe consequences. Moreover, we have reason to believe that Miss Sokolova deliberately hid her position from others, including the father of the child." There was a commotion in the hall. Holly jumped up from her seat. Her face contorted with anger. "That's a lie. I didn't hide it. Daniel knew." Her voice rose to a scream, and the judge was forced to call for order. "If Mr. Wallace knew about your pregnancy, why did he tell the investigator himself that he only found out about it at the hospital?" retorted Sarah's lawyer. "We have a copy of his testimony." Holly looked at her lawyer in confusion, who whispered something quickly in her ear. Sarah watched the scene, feeling strangely detached, as if everything that was happening was the plot of a television series and not her real life. Suddenly, the doors of the hall opened and a woman entered, a tall blonde with a noticeably rounded belly. Sarah recognized her immediately, the third lady in the photo from Daniel's business trip to Miami. "I'm sorry I'm late, Your Honor," the blonde said, confidently walking to the front rows. "My name is Catherine Foster, and I would like to testify in this case." The judge frowned, not hiding her displeasure at the violation of the rules, but after a short meeting with the secretary, she allowed Catherine to act as a witness. "I met Daniel Wallace in Miami 4 months ago," Catherine began, putting her hand on her stomach. "He introduced himself as a free man, said that he had recently divorced. We spent 3 days together, after which he returned to New York, promising to keep in touch. A month later, I found out that I was pregnant." There was silence in the hall. All eyes were on Catherine's stomach. Holly sat with her head down and her face in her hands. "When I told Daniel about the pregnancy, he was happy at first," Catherine continued. "He said that he always dreamed of having a child. But then I found out from the news that he is not divorced at all, that he has a wife and another pregnant woman." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Daniel dreamed of having a child. For the entire 8 years of their marriage, he urged her to postpone having children, focus on her career, and wait for a more appropriate moment. "I am here to demand from Daniel Wallace the recognition of paternity and the payment of financial security," Catherine concluded her testimony, "and to declare to the court, this man is a pathological liar, manipulator, and fraudster." The judge announced a break so the parties to the process could reflect on the newly received information. In the lobby, Sarah crossed paths with Stephen, the man who claimed to be Holly's husband and sent her a flower arrangement after the scandal. "We need to talk," he said, pulling Sarah away from the curious onlookers. "I have information that can completely change the course of the proceedings." It turned out that Stephen was not Holly's husband, but her ex-fiancé. They split up a year and a half ago, when Holly started working for Daniel's corporation. "I work for the FBI in the Financial Crimes Unit," Stephen explained, showing his official ID. "For the last 9 months, we have been monitoring your husband and Holly. We have good reason to believe that they were jointly planning a large-scale theft of funds from Peak Industries." Sarah listened to him, feeling the solid ground slipping away from under her feet. "Daniel is a fraud, a thief. It didn't fit in my head." "Why are you telling me this?" she asked when Stephen had finished his story. "Because you're a victim too," he replied. "And because I have evidence that they plan to get rid of you after gaining access to your inheritance." "An inheritance?" Sarah's father passed away 8 months ago, leaving her a significant sum of money and a stake in the construction business. Daniel insisted that she issue a power of attorney for him to manage these assets, but she kept putting it off, experiencing inexplicable inner anxiety. "I have a recording of their conversations." Stephen took out a USB stick. "They are discussing how best to eliminate you after gaining full control of the inheritance. Holly suggests faking an accident while on vacation." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered how Daniel had recently insisted on going to the Dominican Republic, offering to try deep-sea diving, even though he knew perfectly well that she was afraid of the deep. "Why didn't you arrest them earlier?" she asked. "We needed irrefutable evidence," Stephen replied. "We were about to collect them when this revenge scandal happened. He messed up all our plans, but he may have saved your life." After the court resumed, Sarah's lawyer asked for the floor and introduced a new witness, Stephen Joseph Cooper, an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The hall buzzed again. The journalists perked up, anticipating a sensation. Stephen provided the court with documents and records confirming that Daniel and Holly planned to steal corporate funds on an especially large scale. But the real shock was caused by the audio recording of their discussion of plans to eliminate Sarah. "It's necessary to make everything look like a fatal accident." Daniel's voice was calm and calculating. "The insurance will pay us $5 million, plus all the inheritance from her father. That's enough to start a new life somewhere in South America." "And if she suspects something?" Holly sounded worried. "She's not as stupid as you think." "She won't suspect. She trusts me blindly. Besides, I'm already putting sedatives in her evening drink." Sarah shuddered, remembering her constant feeling of exhaustion and periodic blackouts over the past months. She'd put it down to overexertion and overload, but now it all made ominous sense. The judge interrupted the playback of the recording and addressed the prosecutor, who was present in the courtroom. After a short meeting, it was decided to immediately detain Daniel Wallace and Holly Sokolova on suspicion of preparing a contract killing and fraud on an especially large scale. Upon hearing this, Holly jumped up and tried to run out of the courtroom, but was blocked by bailiffs. She screamed that she knew nothing about the murder plans, that Daniel had deceived and used her in the same way as other women. Sarah watched the scene with a feeling of strange desolation. Everything she believed turned out to be a lie. The man she spent 8 years with planned her murder for financial gain. After the hearing, Sarah left the courthouse, accompanied by Stephen. Reporters rushed to them with questions, but Stephen professionally pushed them aside, helping Sarah get to the car. "What's going to happen to our townhouse now?" she asked as they drove away from the courthouse complex. "I found out that Daniel had secretly mortgaged it by taking out a loan for some kind of joint business project with Holly." "Don't worry about it," Stephen replied. "The loan was obtained fraudulently. The bank will cancel it after the investigation is completed. The property will remain yours." They stopped at a small, cozy bistro. Sarah felt exhausted, but strangely peaceful. For the first time in a long time, she could breathe deeply without feeling heavy in her chest. "You know," she said when they sat down at a table, "I loved him. She really loved him. Even when I saw Holly, part of me was still hoping that this was some kind of misunderstanding, that he would come to his senses and come back. People like Daniel are not capable of genuine feelings, Stephen replied. For them, others are just tools to achieve their goals. It's not your fault that you believed him. He is to blame for abusing your trust. Sarah looked out the window at the people passing by. Everyone has their own story, their own joys and sorrows. She felt transformed, as if she had thrown off a heavy weight that she had been carrying without knowing it. "What are you going to do next?" asked Stephen. Sarah thought about it. For the first time in a long time, the future was not determined by Daniel's plans, his career ambitions, his decisions. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe I'll open my own business. I have a degree in architecture. I've always dreamed of owning my own design studio." Daniel considered it a frivolous hobby.